There comes a quiet moment in a man's life when familiar faces begin to feel distant. Conversations shorten, smiles lose warmth, and something unnamed settles into the air. You have not changed your tone, raised your voice, or demanded attention, yet a subtle resistance appears. It feels undeserved, almost confusing. You replay recent interactions in your mind, searching for the offense that never occurred. The isolation is not dramatic. It is muted, polite, and strangely persistent. It leaves you questioning whether calm itself has become a problem. This moment does not arrive with conflict. It arrives with distance. People who once spoke freely now measure their words. Invitations soften or disappear. There is no clear accusation, only an unspoken shift that places you slightly outside the circle. For many men, this creates inner tension. The instinct is to explain, to correct perceptions, or to retreat into self-doubt. Yet none of these impulses bring clarity. They only deepen the sense of dislocation. Stoicism does not rush to resolve this experience. It asks you to observe it. It invites you to look at the situation without emotional noise, without self-condemnation, and without blame. Before there is strategy or response, there is awareness. Something in the social environment has changed, not because of what you have taken, but because of what you no longer give. Understanding this requires patience and restraint. Point 1. Calm exposes inner disorder. Emotional control has a way of revealing what others work hard to conceal. When a man responds with steadiness instead of agitation, he becomes a mirror. In that reflection, insecurity becomes visible. Those who rely on emotional reactions to feel significant sense a loss of leverage. Calm does not argue, explain, or perform. It simply exists, and that presence can feel threatening to people whose inner state is unstable. From a Stoic perspective, composure is not a tactic. It is alignment with reality. You are no longer ruled by impulses that once made you predictable. This disrupts social patterns. Some individuals feel uneasy when they cannot provoke a response or draw energy from emotional exchange. Your restraint forces them to confront their own lack of control, and this confrontation is rarely welcomed. Hatred in this context is not personal. It is defensive. It arises when your behavior exposes a contrast they would rather ignore. Your silence during conflict, your patience under pressure, and your refusal to escalate highlight the chaos they carry internally. Instead of correcting themselves, they externalize discomfort. Dislike becomes a way to restore balance in their mind. Stoicism teaches that you are not responsible for easing another person's inner disorder. When your calm unsettles someone, it is evidence of their struggle, not your wrongdoing. The disciplined man accepts this without pride or guilt. He understands that emotional order is rare, and those without it will resist its presence. This resistance is subtle and expressed as quiet hostility. Point 2. Independence removes control. Independence alters social dynamics more than overt dominance ever could. When a man becomes self-sufficient in thought, emotion, and direction, he no longer needs permission to act or approval to exist. This absence of dependence unsettles those who draw stability from influence over others. They are accustomed to exchange, to leverage, to mutual reassurance. Your autonomy removes their role. Stoicism emphasizes inner sufficiency as a foundation of freedom. You are guided by principle rather than applause. You make decisions without broadcasting them, and you stand by them without justification. For people who rely on validation loops, this feels like rejection. They interpret your independence as detachment, even superiority, though no such message was sent. Control often hides behind friendliness. When it disappears, discomfort surfaces. Those who once felt necessary now feel irrelevant. Your lack of need becomes a reminder of their reliance. Instead of cultivating their own independence, they resist yours. Resentment grows quietly, framed as dislike or suspicion. The Stoic understands that autonomy is not isolation. It is clarity of responsibility. You carry your own weight, and you allow others to carry theirs. If this balance provokes hostility, it reveals a fragile structure built on dependence. The disciplined man does not adjust his stance to soothe that fragility. He remains steady, knowing that true independence inevitably disturbs those invested in control. Freedom without explanation challenges fragile hierarchies, and those who benefit from them react with unease, suspicion, and quiet opposition, rather than honest self-examination and personal accountability. Point 3. Growth forces comparison. Progress that is silent creates the sharpest comparisons. When you improve without announcement, others fill the silence with assumptions. They measure their stagnation against your movement and feel exposed. Envy rarely announces itself openly. It disguises itself as criticism, distance, or moral judgment. Your growth becomes the reference point they never agreed to use. Stoicism recognizes comparison as a source of unnecessary suffering. You work because it is required, not because it is witnessed. Yet those around you may feel challenged simply by your consistency. Your discipline forces a reckoning. It reminds them of postponed efforts, abandoned goals, and unkept promises. This reminder is uncomfortable, and discomfort seeks release. Resentment offers an easy outlet. Instead of acknowledging admiration or motivation, some choose dismissal. They reduce your progress to arrogance or luck. This protects their self-image while allowing resentment to breathe. Your quiet advancement, free of boasting, leaves them no narrative to contest, only their own reflection. The Stoic does not slow his pace to ease another's comparison. He understands that growth will always separate those who act from those who observe. If that separation invites hostility, it confirms the path, not the error. Progress is not loud, but its presence is undeniable. By continuing forward without apology, you accept that some will choose resentment over responsibility, and that choice belongs entirely to them, not to the standards you quietly uphold through daily effort, restraint, and patience, practiced beyond the reach of public approval and without need for external validation. Point 4. Silence is misread. Silence unsettles people more than words ever could. When you stop explaining yourself, others begin to imagine intentions that were never formed. Silence is often mistaken for judgment, distance, or concealed hostility. In reality, it is frequently restraint. The Stoic chooses silence not to elevate himself, but to conserve energy and maintain clarity. Modern social interaction expects constant signaling. Opinions must be stated, emotions displayed, and loyalties reaffirmed. When you withdraw from this exchange, you violate an unspoken contract. Some interpret this as arrogance because they rely on noise to establish connection. Your quiet presence offers no reassurance, no feedback, and no emotional cues to manage. Stoicism accepts misunderstanding as a natural consequence of discipline. You are not obligated to correct every assumption or soothe every insecurity. Silence allows others to reveal their own projections. What they accuse you of often reflects what they fear or desire within themselves. The disciplined man understands that being understood is not a prerequisite for integrity. He speaks when necessary and remains silent when words would only dilute truth. If silence invites dislike, it is a price paid for inner order. Calm does not announce itself, and it does not defend its existence. Those who depend on constant affirmation interpret restraint as rejection, and in that misinterpretation, resentment forms where understanding might have grown through patience. Yet the Stoic accepts this outcome, choosing composure over clarity and stability over fragile approval from unsettled minds who seek noise to escape their own disorder and insecurity. Point 5. Withdrawal from emotional games. When you withdraw from emotional games, some people experience it as abandonment. Drama creates roles, and those roles provide identity. The peacemaker, the provocateur, the victim, the ally. When you refuse to participate, the structure collapses. Your absence removes contrast, and without contrast, the game loses meaning. Stoicism teaches disengagement without contempt. You do not announce your exit or condemn those who remain. You simply stop feeding what does not serve reason or character. For individuals invested in emotional exchange, this feels personal. They mistake your boundary for judgment, though it is merely self-governance. Emotional games thrive on reaction. When you deny that fuel, the dynamic shifts. Those who relied on your responses to regulate themselves feel exposed. Instead of adapting, they often assign blame. You become cold, distant, or ungrateful in their narrative. This narrative protects them from examining their dependence. The Stoic understands that withdrawal is not rejection. It is alignment. You choose peace over participation and clarity over chaos. If others interpret this as hostility, it reflects their need for engagement, not your intent. Calm separation is sometimes the most honest form of respect. By stepping back, you allow relationships to exist without manipulation, but those built on emotional leverage rarely survive such neutrality. This loss is interpreted as betrayal by people who confuse intensity with connection and dependence with loyalty, because they never learned how to relate without constant emotional stimulation, validation, and conflict to anchor their sense of self and belonging to others externally. Point 6. Virtue separates you from the crowd. Virtue has a separating effect that few acknowledge honestly. Discipline, restraint, and consistency quietly redraw social boundaries. When a man governs himself, he becomes less influenced by collective impulse. This naturally places distance between him and the crowd, not out of superiority, but out of incompatibility. Stoicism frames virtue as internal order. You wake, work, and rest according to principle rather than mood. Over time, this steadiness becomes visible. Others sense it, even if they cannot name it. It creates discomfort for those who rely on shared weakness to feel connected. Your standards raise an unspoken question about theirs. Character does not argue, it stands. In its presence, some feel diminished, not because you have taken something, but because they have avoided something. Instead of rising, they retreat into judgment. Dislike becomes a way to reassert equality without effort. The Stoic accepts solitude as a consequence of integrity. He does not chase belonging at the cost of character. Virtue is not designed to attract crowds. It is designed to stabilize the individual. If that stability creates separation, it confirms alignment with reason, not failure of connection. Those who commit to discipline often find fewer companions, yet the remaining connections carry depth, clarity, and mutual respect, grounded in shared values, while resentment fades in relevance as inner standards replace the need for broad acceptance among those who value principle over popularity, restraint over impulse, and long-term coherence over fleeting social comfort and approval from others around them. Daily, consistently maintained. Point 7. Stoic response. When faced with unexplained dislike, the Stoic response is measured and restrained. There is no defense because nothing was taken. There is no retaliation because nothing was threatened. You observe reactions without absorbing them. You remain aligned with your principles, not the shifting emotions of others. Stoicism teaches that external opinions exist outside your control. To chase them is to surrender authority. Instead, you maintain composure and continue your work. You neither soften your character to appease nor harden it to intimidate. You allow others to think as they will, knowing that their judgments speak more about their state than your actions. Silence replaces explanation. Consistency replaces argument. Over time, your behavior forms its own answer. Some will adjust, others will drift further away. Both outcomes are acceptable. The disciplined man does not negotiate with misunderstanding. He stands, acts, and moves forward without resentment, anchored in self-respect and rational calm. His focus remains on what can be governed, the mind, the will, and the choices that shape character daily, while releasing attachment to approval, blame, or interpretation beyond his influence entirely and without complaint or internal disturbance forming within him at any moment of testing or social friction encountered. If people begin to resent you without reason, the answer is rarely found in correction or confrontation. It is found in composure. You continue without announcement, apology, or defense. You do not shrink to regain comfort, nor expand to demand recognition. You remain intact. Stoic strength is quiet. It allows misunderstanding to exist without becoming a wound. It accepts distance without interpreting it as loss. When others turn away, you do not chase. You remain grounded in your own conduct, knowing that dignity is preserved through restraint. In this, you become untouchable, not because you are hardened, but because you are whole. Nothing external can disturb a man who governs himself fully with patience, clarity, and unwavering commitment to reason.